The Joe Rogan Experience.
So then there was the whole section that you probably remember about chicken and fish causing cancer, dairy products causing cancer. They started it really kind of went from just like, you can do well on a plant-based diet as an athlete to like, animal products are horrible and are going to kill you, which was a big leap. So they had one study. James Wilks says, research funded by the National Cancer Institute found that vegetarians who had one or more servings per week of white meat like chicken and fish more than tripled their risk of colon cancer. Well, that's scary. I don't want to triple my risk of colon cancer. But again, if you look at the totality of the research, slide 42, Jamie, 2017, a meta-analysis of 16 prospective studies with almost 2.5 million participants found no increase in cancer risk from consuming fish or poultry. And then you have a statement from the American Cancer Institute itself saying, as for other animal products, organizations that do comprehensive evidence reviews to make dietary recommendations currently do not recommend against poultry like chicken, turkey, ground or fresh, fish, or dairy.
So where's that coming from then?
One study that looked at Seventh-day Adventists who added some of those foods back into their diet. This is a perfect example of healthy user bias because Seventh-day Adventists are not supposed to eat meat. So if you have a Seventh-day Adventist who's bucking the trend, who's rebelling and eating meat, then what else are they doing that is also not healthy and not following the dictates of that healthy lifestyle? So that was
and
a
they
small.
They didn't take that into consideration. They
No.
didn't ask them whether they're drinking. Or
That was a 6-year study in the Seventh-day Adventist cohort from 1976 to 1982. And it was what I call them SDA rebels. They're supposed to eat vegetarian, but they add meat. So what else are they doing that's
that's
confounding
interesting.
that?
And the reason why this is relevant is this is the only study that we know of that does show a correlation between...
Well, there might be other individual studies that do, but this is why we have these large reviews that look at, this one looked at 16 studies with 2.5 million participants and found no association. And then that's why you have groups like the American Cancer Institute who say, they make this recommendation.
Well, people are up in arms at the most recent recommendation that people have been told to avoid red meat.
Oh, yeah.
They said, well, actually, there's no risk at all eating red meat. We're taking that off of the list of foods to avoid. And everybody went shit. They just went ape shit.
Let's talk about
for lack of a better term.
Yeah, they did. They freaked out. Because
it conflicts with the dogma.
Absolutely. And this was a 5-paper review. So it wasn't just one paper. It was 5 papers all in one review. It was millions of participants. They reviewed all of the available literature on red meat, and in its relationship with any disease, heart disease, cancer, type 2 diabetes. It was dozens of studies following people for up to 35 years and millions of participants. They looked at randomized controlled trials. They looked at observational cohort studies. They looked at all kinds of outcomes, total mortality, cardiovascular, cancer, etc. And they found, quote, only low or very low certainty evidence that red meat causes any kind of disease. And in the editorial, in the Annals, which is what it was published, Annals of Internal Medicine, the journal it was published in, they said, quote, this is slide 19, Jamie. Over and over again, the authors, stressed that even if the results were statistically significant, their certainty was low and the absolute differences seen were small and potentially confounded, meaning could have been that they were smoking more or drinking more or not exercising or whatever.
Factors.
The editorial also said, this is sure to be controversial, but it's based on the most comprehensive review of the evidence to date. Because that review is inclusive, those who seek to dispute it will be hard-pressed to find appropriate evidence with which to build an argument.
Unless you have a nice documentary.
Yeah.
And you can just put in whatever fucking evidence you want.
Ignore it. Yeah.
Yeah. The really frustrating thing for people is also recommend it's unprocessed and processed.
Yeah.
So the dogma had always been, well, just stay away from processed meat and you can avoid
fresh red. Yeah, because some studies showed no difference with fresh, but some difference with processed red meat. I think you could make a stronger argument that too much processed meat might be harmful because of things like nitroso compounds that are formed, et cetera. But even then, you have to consider context. Most people
Yes.
are eating hot dogs with buns and French fries and big gulps. You know,
right.
It's probably a different effect than having bacon a couple times a week with your whole foods diet, or having some salami and nuts. You know, not the same as eating, fake processed meat all the time.
And one of the things that's weird about this whole conversation is it's there's a battleground. So like a volley gets thrown out there like this, like boom, it's okay to eat red meat. And you see the other side scrambling to refute the evidence and then fire back with all these epidemiology studies that show that red meat can kill you, and red meat's causing you to age quicker, and red meat kills your boners, and red meat does this and does that. And it's like, where there's a religious war going on.
It's the same weird thing we were talking about earlier. Now, when you have some kind of political event or some event that happens, it gets spun. You know, if you go watch CNN, it's going to get spun one way. If you go watch Fox, it's going to get spun the other way. It's the same event, but you have these totally different interpretations.
Yeah.